Although the core lessons in CC are taught in Adobe, I will explore all the other relevant editing softwares, for example, Capcut. The following lessons in this entire module will be around Capcut, and by the end of them, you will have proficiency in Capcut. Before we do get started, I want to mention a simple note and end the debate about which particular software is better. All editing software have their unique capabilities, but on the surface level, for the majority of the edits that are required by clients, businesses, brands, or you as a creator, you need not worry about the editing application. If you're leaning towards Capcut, that's most likely because it's a free editing software. The key concept I want you to understand is it's not the software that makes the content creation, it's the editor behind the software. But let's not get all philosophical and let's jump straight into our home screen. So when we load up Capcut, this is the first screen you'll see. It's the welcome screen. And once you start creating your own videos, projects will get saved automatically, and you'll be able to toggle through different projects by clicking this grid icon over here, and you can change from viewing them in a grid structure or a list structure. If Capcut is going to be your main editing software, then you might have multiple projects. Therefore, a quick way to find them within the welcome screen is to hit the search button, and you can go ahead and type your project name. If you counter any problems with Capcut, the best way to reach out to the support team is to hit this speech bubble icon in the top right hand corner, which is feedback. You can go ahead, give the support team some feedback. You can upload a video or even upload your project to help any problems you may be experiencing whilst using Capcut. Next to the speech bubble, we have the settings. If I go ahead and click this, click on settings, you'll have 4 options: project, edit, performance, and language. So within the project area, you can designate your save to. You also have your cache management here, which I have selected as don't delete, and you can come back to this settings area and delete them manually. If you don't understand what I mean by cache, don't worry about it. We won't get into that just yet. I'll explain this further down the line. Then you also have your edit, which you can change the image duration. Again, something I'll explain to you a little bit later on. And we have the frame rate and time code. I'm going to leave them as default. You'll have performance, not to worry about this. Language, go ahead and select the language that's applicable to you. For me, it's English. So for me, Capcut is completely blank, so I'm going to go ahead and click on new project. This is the interface for Capcut, and this is what we'll be working in for the rest of our lessons. What I want to do very quickly is import a video, and what I'm going to do is over here on the left hand panel, click import, click on my human anatomy video, and go ahead and import this. So as you can see, I've got my video imported, and I also can see this video in the preview section. However, the video is not currently in my timeline. I'm going to drag the video over to my timeline and let go. So here I can drag my playhead across and see the human anatomy video in the preview section. Really simple lesson as we get familiar with the welcome screen. And in the next lesson, let's deep dive the user interface and orientation of Capcut. Timeline panel. If for whatever reason we want to minimize, pop out, or remove a panel completely, we can go over to the workspace icon in the top right hand corner of the screen, click it, and we get this drop down menu, which allows us to select whichever panel we may be interested in. I'm going to go ahead and click the timeline first option, and straight away you can see the timeline has actually popped out of its position. If I click on this black bar, I can drag and move the timeline around the screen, and if I hover over the 3 dots in the center, I have 3 options. I can restore back to its original position, I can go full screen, or I can minimize the timeline completely. I'm going to go ahead and restore the timeline back to its original position. For those of you who are familiar with my style of content creation, I tend to leave everything on the default setting. It's also worth noting, next to the workspace panel icon, you have shortcuts. So if I go ahead and click shortcut, this will go ahead and bring up a set of shortcuts applicable to your operating system in relation to the timeline, player, basic, and other. You could go ahead and change the shortcuts by simply clicking on the shortcuts to modify them. And toward the top right hand side, we have this drop down menu which has a set of presets. So for example, currently the shortcut to split or cut a video clip on your timeline is Command B. So for example, the shortcut one on the Mac, if I'd like to split a video clip on my timeline, I'd need to press Command B. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to scrub my playhead further down the timeline and I'll press Command B. you can see this has created a cut or a split to my video clip. If I go ahead back into shortcut and change my preset to shortcut 2, we now can see that the split shortcut is Command K. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And if I move my playhead further down the timeline and press Command B again, nothing happens. However, if I press Command K, there we go. I've created another split. Once again, I'm just going to go back into shortcuts. The default preset for Capcut is shortcut 1. Hit save. And there we go. We're ready to begin editing our project. The workspaces and orientation within Capcut are very similar to Final Cut Pro, extremely user-friendly and quite smooth. However, within Capcut, there are some limitations that you will experience within each of these workspaces. This is something we'll explore further down the line. For now, let's hop into the next lesson and explore each of these workspaces further. Ratio, as you can manually input the pixels you require. For the purpose of this crash course, my aspect ratio will be 9:16, which is, of course, from the previous lesson, you'd have noticed that the player has changed to a vertical video. So what I'd like to do in this lesson is explore the player panel a bit further. The first thing I want to show you is the ability to zoom in and out and reposition your video footage on the player. The simplest way of doing this is clicking the bottom right hand magnifying glass in the player panel. This then brings up a slider bar which you can increase and decrease the zoom in and zoom out. Now notice when I drag the slider bar, a very small box appears which allows me to readjust my view of where I may be zooming in. And if I want to restore this back to its default, I'll just drag it down to the line on the slider bar, and as you get closer it will just snap back into position. You can also click on the video within the player panel. From here you can manually adjust the size by dragging the 4 points of the video. Maybe you want to rotate, or perhaps you even want to reposition. There are also ways to do micro adjustments in the adjustment panel, but that's not something I want to go into just yet, and we will pick that up as we go further into the crash course. The next thing within the player panel is aspect ratio. Now, next to the magnifying icon, you can see it says 9:16. If you've not selected a specific aspect ratio, it will say original. So if I click on the 9:16, there is an entire preset menu. I'm going to go ahead and hit original. You can also click customize, which allows you to be more detailed in your aspect ratio, as you can manually input the pixels you require. For the purpose of this crash course, my aspect ratio will be 9:16, which is of course the optimal format for TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and all other vertical content. If I go ahead and hit the burger icon in the top right hand corner of the player panel, I'm met by color, scope, preview, quality, and export still frame. So I'm just going to quickly turn on the color scope so you can see the user interface change. And what happens is we have 3 color oscillators or scopes, whatever you want to call it. But this is more in relation to color grading, something we'll talk about a bit later on. So for now, let's go ahead and turn that off. You also have preview quality. This is related to the playback. So you can go ahead and check performance priority if perhaps you have a larger project and you don't necessarily need to see a very high or higher resolution playback. For me, as we travel through this crash course, I won't be working with anything that will put stress on my operating system. So for now, I will leave quality priority checked. And of course, you've got export still frame. And what I'm going to do to show you this is move my player head in the timeline to a section of the video which I think looks pretty good as a still frame. Hit the burger icon. If I click export still frame, I have a set of options which are pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to go ahead and hit export, and you can see over here in the media panel I've got a .png, which is an image or a screen clipping of what is currently in the player panel. I could drag this down from my media panel into my timeline, and if I just quickly scrub across these, you'll notice on the timeline as I get to the exported still frame, you'll just see the exported still frame that I've dragged onto the timeline. So there you have it. We're all set up now to go ahead and create vertical content within Capcut. I've started to create the timeline for the intro sequence on one of my video ads. Let's have a quick look.
Life as a man is not a walk in the park. It's like a video game. You start from absolute nothing. You start from zero. You have no intrinsic value, and it's up to you to level up your skills.
And what I want to do in this lesson is cover some of the editing tools that are presented to you in the timeline for Capcut. The very first thing I want you to notice is if you have a clip selected, towards the top of the timeline, you have a set of tools. If I click click off a clip, you notice these tools have disappeared. So when accessing certain tools that I'll be describing throughout this lesson, ensure that you have your clip selected. Over towards the left hand side, you have a drop down menu, which gives you 4 tools and the keyboard shortcuts. The first tool being select, and this allows you to move your clips around on the timeline. Towards the right hand side of the timeline, you have a feature called track magnet. If I click this on, what this allows you to do is automatically snap and delete the spaces within your cuts. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and you'll see that my timeline will change dramatically. Now ignore the timeline. What I actually want to do is show you the function of the magnet, and the best way for me to do this is remove everything. I'm going to highlight all the audio tracks, hit backspace, highlight the other 2 tracks I've got above, hit backspace, and let's just say this is the clip that we've dragged into our timeline. With the magnet turned on, I'm going to go ahead and start splitting and deleting this track, which leads us onto our second tool. Again, in the drop down menu, or if you press B, it will give you the split tool. You can see that the mouse icon has turned into a razor, and if you hover it over your timeline video clip, you can see this yellow line that allows you to create splits in your timeline. So I'm going to go ahead and just start picking little sections that I'd like to split. There you go. I'll click A on the keyboard to go back to my select icon, and if I click on this particular split that I've made and hit backspace, you notice that the track automatically fills the gap. Let me show you again. Command Z to get the original split and hit backspace to delete. Boom. I'm going to hit Command Z again, and this time I'm going to turn the magnet off, hit backspace on this particular split that we've made, and the gap remains. If I delete another 2 clips, you can see we have these gaps throughout our edit, and if I hit the turn on magnet again, you'll have all the gaps closed and the clips next to one another. Now there's something that I want to mention here. Me personally, when I'm editing, I wouldn't use something like the snap magnet because it's almost a left to right editing style, and that doesn't necessarily suit my editing style in particular, because I tend to piece videos at different points within a narrative, and then where I have gaps I come back and fill those. However, if you're editing a talking head video, a podcast as such, then it might be better for you to just have the turn on magnet and start cutting and deleting certain sections. It can come in handy and save a lot of time. The next tool I want to mention, which is actually next to the turn on magnet, is the turn off or on auto snapping. This is a really cool feature. It's something that I definitely recommend everybody use within their edits. If I turn it off, what it'll allow me to do is take a clip and move it anywhere in the timeline without any snap feature. If I go back over to the right hand side and turn the auto snapping on, you'll see if I drag this clip and place it next to another clip, you've got this line that represents an auto snap feature. So if I let go of the clip, it'll automatically snap in place. And you can see this if I drag it around next to the clips, it'll automatically snap your video or audio in place. A really simple feature. It's very common amongst many editing softwares. I always recommend you have it turned on. It allows you to piece together cuts that you've made in a much more cleaner way. You can also, of course, create new tracks. How you do this is just drag your clip up or down, and it'll allow you to create new tracks within the Capcut timeline. And then back into the same menu towards the left hand side of the timeline, you have select leftward and select rightward, which works in a very similar way to your select tool. However, it will focus on all video and audio clips within the timeline. So if I click select leftward and then click a particular clip on my timeline, everything associated to the left of this clip will be highlighted, and then I can move it around. As you could tell, this particular clip on the right hand side and this audio on the right hand side, they've not been highlighted. If I go ahead and select right forward and click on this particular clip, we can move all these linked clips towards the right hand side of the screen. I'll press A to get off that and go back to my normal select tool. And another simple feature I'd like to show is towards the right hand side, you have turn on preview axis. If you click this, you'll notice as your mouse hovers over the timeline, you have this yellow line indicator. And what that allows you to do is, rather than moving or scrubbing your playhead, whatever position your mouse is in, you're able to see the video clips in the player. I don't necessarily think this is a good idea to keep on. It can slow down your operating system. Therefore, I would recommend you have this off. And if you do need to check your timeline, just use the playhead and drag it across certain clips that you are particularly interested in viewing. There are, of course, more tools within the timeline, and we're going to discuss those in the next lesson. The very first thing I want to discuss is the panel on the left hand side against each track. So you have 3 options on each track. You have the lock feature, which will lock the track and not allow any movement to any of the clips within that track. This can come in handy if you're using the main track magnet. You can go ahead and click the lock button again to unlock the track. Next to that, you have a I button, which is a feature that will allow you to hide the track. And then next to that, you have a speaker button, which if you click will allow you to mute any audio on that particular track. Now, what I need you to understand, although we've got separate audio added into our timeline, the 300 Leonidas clip here, it comes with its own audio. So rather than the Capcut timeline segregating the audio is actually captured within the same track. So for example, if I zoom in on the Tate clip that I've got here, and I can zoom in by moving the slider between these 2 magnifying glasses here on the top right hand corner. Of course, you have shortcuts as always. If I hover over the minus, it's essentially control with the minus sign or control with the plus sign, command if you're on Mac. So I'll go ahead and hit command plus. And as I zoom in closer, you can see here, there's a waveform that's captured within this video clip. And that waveform is actually the sound from the video clip. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute this track because I actually want the sound of Tate hitting the bag. Now, as I mentioned in part 1 of the timeline tools, when you click on a particular clip, you have a set of tools that appear at the top of the timeline. The very first one I want to talk about is the delete tool, which of course you could hit backspace and there we go. The clip's deleted. Command Z to bring the clip back, or I can go ahead and hit this trash icon. Next to that, I have what is called the freeze tool. So if I click the freeze tool at a particular point within the timeline where my playhead is positioned, what will happen is I get a still image of what is currently being shown on the player, and this image will also be embedded into my timeline. So let's go ahead and have a click. So you can see here on this particular track, freeze, and it's a 3-second freeze frame of the particular section of the video where I initially had my playhead position. So if I hide the track above and I go back to the start of this particular clip, you can see as I scrub through, eventually we'll hit the freeze frame. And as I drag my playhead, you can see that is a particular freeze that has been added into the clip. And then as I move past that freeze frame, we move back into the video. So that's just a really quick way to snapshot something on the screen that's in a track and bring it into your timeline. I'm going to hit Command Z to remove that. Then I'm going to go ahead and look at the next tool, which is the reverse tool. So if we move over to this clip here where Leonidas is moving his head to look over at the wolf, if I click this clip and hit the reverse tool, you'll see it says reverse completed. But obviously, depending on your operating system, you may be greeted by a pop-up with a percentage from 0 to 100%, whereby Capcut is processing the clip and reversing it. So if we have a look back at this clip, it now looks as if Leonidas is looking at the wolf. And as I move my playhead more further into the clip, it looks as if Leonidas is looking away, because we reversed it. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command Z again. Staying on this clip, next to the reverse tool is the mirror tool, which is pretty self-explanatory. If I hit the mirror tool, you'll see that we mirror the clip. I'm going to go ahead and hit mirror again to put it back to its original position. And next to the mirror tool is the rotate tool, which again is pretty self-explanatory. If we click it, we can rotate the video clip 90 degrees each time. And then next to the rotate tool is the crop tool, which is a pretty interesting feature. If I go ahead and click crop, it'll allow me to bring the entire clip that may fall out of the 9:16 parameters, and I can go ahead and reposition or crop a particular section. Let's say I want this particular area. If I hit confirm, you'll see that I've cropped just that section to fit in the 9:16 aspect ratio of the player head. And with all that being said, this 2-part timeline lessons should get you fairly up to speed with editing within Capcut straight away. Okay, let's start diving into the adjustment panel. And what I'd like to do with you is look at keyframe animations. Now, over in the adjustment panel, when you have a particular clip clicked on your timeline, you're able to see a variety of different tools that we'll be discussing throughout these lessons. For this lesson, let's look at position and size. You have your scale, your position, rotation, and towards the right of these, you have a clickable diamond, which is a keyframe. If I scrub my playhead towards a particular part that I'd like to zoom in, let's take the point of Tate kicking the bag, I can go ahead and hit a keyframe on the scale position, maybe move 1 or 2 clicks down, 1, 2, and I'll adjust the scale slightly in, and then I could move 1, 2 clicks further out and reposition the scale back to 316, I believe it was, and I should get this little bump effect. So scale in and scale out. And I'm going to apply this across each point that Tate hits the bag. I think this hook here could do with a zoom in and zoom out. So again, I'm going to hit my keyframe at 316, move down 2 positions, go ahead and increase the zoom. Again, move 2 positions down, and I'll decrease the zoom back to its original position, which was 316. So once again, we have this zoom effect. Let's get it on this hook here as well. Zoom in, 1, 2, zoom back out. And if I play this clip now, we should be able to see a quick zoom in and zoom out when Tate hits the bag.
Skills. You work on your fitness, your fighting.
It's a very subtle effect. I tend to use it quite a lot when there's anything to do with hitting. And I suppose you could call it a pop effect. However, the key thing I wanted to show was how you would go about adding in keyframes. So if you look over here on the timeline, you can see the keyframes that have been added on the clip. Now, let's just say I'd like to remove a particular keyframe. What I would do is get my playhead on the keyframe, and you can feel this type of snap that occurs when you position the playhead over. And again, back in the adjustment panel, you can see that we've got a keyframe enabled by the diamond being a turquoise color. So if I hover my mouse over this diamond, I now have the option to delete the keyframe. So if I go ahead and click it, you can see over in the clip, the keyframe has been deleted. So I'm going to hit Command Z to bring the keyframe back. And this, of course, also applies to position and rotation. So if I go ahead and hit a keyframe for position at this point, maybe move it down a bit, and I can change the position. A quick way to do this is by repositioning the clip on the player head. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag this clip, and you can see over on the adjustment panel, a keyframe has been added, and I can confirm this again by the diamond that's appeared on the particular clip that we're playing around with. So if I go ahead and just scrub my playhead, you can see that the clip itself is moving into a different position. So let's play that from the top.
You work on your fitness, your fighting skills.
Very subtle. And like I always say, in all the lessons and all the tutorials I give about effects and transitions, the subtler the effect and the transition, the better. So again, we can do a similar thing with the rotation. I'm going to go ahead and add a keyframe, move 1 or 2 frames down, and then I can change the position. And I could do this by clicking this small icon within this circle, holding down and dragging and moving around in any position that I want the clip to rotate in. This is a much more fast and smoother way than doing micro adjustments within the actual rotate box itself. So again, if I just move my playhead, you can see a rotation happens. Just for the sake of it, I'm going to go ahead and throw in another rotation so you can just see the clip is rotating against the keyframes. And there you have it. That is how you would use keyframe animations within Capcut. In this lesson, I'd like to talk about blend mode, and it's fairly simple within Capcut. It's a great effect that I use commonly throughout my edits. Currently, you can see in the player panel, I have this human anatomy video overlaid on the Leonidas video. Within my timeline, I have the Leonidas video on the main track, and then I have the human anatomy video above. If I click on the human anatomy video, over in the adjustment panel, you can see under position and size, we have blend. I've currently got this checked, and within the mode, you have a variety of options. If I leave this on normal, you can see that because the human anatomy video is above the main track, Capcut will acknowledge this as the main video that needs to be shown. However, I can start playing around with the blend. So hitting the drop down menu, I have a variety of options. I commonly play between overlay and screen. However, feel free to choose one of the other modes depending on your creative style and see what looks good. As you can see, we get this creative blend between the 2 clips. Now, there's also another way in which you can apply a blend mode, and that's using opacity and keyframe. So as I move further down in the timeline, I've got a clip of the wolf growling, and then I've also blended in the anatomy video over 2 separate clips of the wolf. Let's quickly play that.
Start from 0. You have no intrinsic value, and it's up to you to...
So what I've essentially done here is on the human anatomy clip, I have 2 keyframes, as you can see, and those are related to the opacity. I'm going to go ahead and remove those 2 keyframes, and we'll do it again. I'm going to click on the human anatomy clip, and at the very start, I'm going to make sure that my opacity located in the blend is at 0. I'll hit a keyframe in, and then from there I'll travel further down to the point where the second clip in the timeline begins to fade, and I'll increase the opacity to 100%, and the keyframe would automatically add. So again, you can see in the human anatomy clip we've got these 2 keyframes, and essentially I've added opacity in that allows the clip to blend over the previous 2 clips, then revert to its normal blend as we progress through the timeline. So those are 2 very simple and interesting ways in which we can blend and merge 2 clips together. It's a great effect, and sometimes it's commonly referred to as double exposure. However, I want to give you a creative tip here. I tend not to blend 2 clips that are cinematic or talking head. What do I mean by this? You'll notice that the clip that I've currently got blended is almost like a graphic or some type of animation. In this case, I've managed to pull a stock footage video of a human anatomy body, and then from there I've blended it on top of a cinematic clip. Personally, I find this much more appealing rather than having 2 A-roll clips on top of each other or 2 cinematic clips on top of each other. 9 times out of 10, my blended clip will always be some sort of graphic or animation. So there you have it, the lesson on blend mode. In this lesson, I want to talk about stabilization. Now, it's not uncommon that some of the clips you'll receive from either a client or maybe even the clips that you've recorded may be shaky. So at this present moment, I've currently got the human anatomy overlay, which then follows on to the punching bag scene of Andrew Tate.
To you to level up your skills. You work on your fitness, your fighting skills.
And what I want to do here is actually cut the punching bag clip and insert a different clip so I can go ahead and show you how we would stabilize that particular clip. So the first thing I'm going to do is reduce the clip we've currently got in the timeline. And then from there, I'm going to introduce the new clip that we currently have. So by now you should know within the media panel, we can go ahead and import any images or videos, whatever we want to bring into our project by simply hitting the import icon in the top left hand side. I've gone ahead and imported this particular video here. I'm going to double click it, and what that will allow us to do is view it on the player screen.
1311.
So we can see that the clip itself is slightly shaky. I don't necessarily need the full duration of the clip. I can drag this clip into my timeline, and from there I can crop it and change it. However, instead of doing this, I can just simply highlight my mouse over the beginning or the end of the clip and just drag ever so slightly to reduce the length of the clip. And I'm just going to get this down to 5 seconds. I'll let go, and you'll see here clearly in the media player that we've got the full clip, but the highlighted section is of the 5 seconds we've just selected. So if I click on this and drag this down, I now have the 5 seconds that I've specified. However, I also have the audio attached to it. So I'm going to right click on extract audio, which now brings the audio to the timeline beneath. Click on this and hit delete. Therefore, I now have just my video. Now, in order to stabilize this video, all I need to do is in the adjustment panel, under blend, we have a checkbox for stabilize. I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and you have 3 selections. You have recommended, minimum cut, and most stable. So depending on how unstable your footage is will depend on which you select. I personally think we can leave this with recommended, but let's go ahead and have a look.
Fighting skills.
Let's try minimum cut. And we can go ahead and try most stable. All 3 work pretty good. I might just leave it on most stable, and I'm going to pull this entire clip down to fit with our current project. Let's go ahead and play some of the project.
Your skills. You work on your fitness, your fighting skills.
I suppose we could pull this out a bit more. Let's start bringing our project together. So as you can see, I've just done 2 cuts. Remove this gap between the audio. Let's increase the background sound, and let's just have a quick look at that.
It's your fighting skills. You make sure that you make money.
That's perfect. What I might do is just remove the tail end of this clip at the point where Andrew says money. I can also see the clip doesn't fit perfectly within the player, so I'll click on the clip, and then from here I'll just increase the scale of the clip so it fits. Perhaps bring it down a bit, and there we go. We have